Yeah, what? Oh man, I feel like I've been asleep forever. What day is it? Whoa! It's already August! Man, what happened? Oh, that's right. I played perhaps the most boring Sonic game of all time. Sonic and the Black Knight for the Nintendo Wii. Yes, following the apparent success of the other Wii exclusive Sonic game, Sonic and the Secret Rings, Sega decided to drop Sonic in another storybook setting 2 years later with Sonic and the Black Knight. And let me tell you, this is one boring, waggle-filled game. And since it's Wii exclusive, you can't blame my dislike of it on me not playing the right version, so ha! Anyway, let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into Sonic and the Uninspired Waggle. I mean Sonic and the game that shouldn't exist. I mean Sonic and the Black Knight. The story is relatively straightforward for once, but that doesn't make it less ridiculous. Sonic is summoned to a medieval kingdom, presumably Camelot, by a young mage named Merlina. She's called him here because the kingdom is being destroyed by the Black Knight, King Arthur. Sonic must defeat King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table to collect 4 sacred swords and stop the kingdom from being destroyed. But first, he has to find the first sword, Caliburn. And yes, the sword talks. And walks. Look at how ridiculous this is. Anyway, Caliburn first tells Sonic he has to prove his knighthood before he can collect the sword, so he does by just progressing through the game, I guess, and he eventually defeats the 3 knights, Lancelot, Shadow, Gawain, Knuckles, and Percival, Blaze. After he collects the swords, they forge together to make the mythical Excalibur, and Sonic defeats the Black Knight for good. But wait! Plot twist! It turns out there never was any King Arthur. He was all made up by Merlina's grandfather, and now she wants to take over the kingdom. So yes, the girl you were originally helping is now the bad guy. Honestly, that's kind of a cool plot twist. Points for that, game. Anyway, Sonic teams up with the other knights, turns into not Super Sonic, and defeats the Queen and saves the kingdom. And in the end, it is revealed that Sonic was the true King Arthur all along. Wow. That's pretty stupid. I take back my earlier points. Anyway, now let's talk about the gameplay, or the lack thereof. Sonic and the Black Knight follows a similar trend set by Secret Rings in that you play through a very linear, very straightforward stage, and then have to do some padding missions to advance to the next linear stage. The key difference, though, is that you don't have to use the motion controls to do absolutely everything like in Secret Rings. You do get to use the joystick on the nunchuck to control Sonic. However, it's still hard to go backwards for some reason, and because of the linear design of the stages, you only get to move slightly left and slightly right. You're not forced to go forward like in Secret Rings, but there's very little wiggle room. The bulk of the gameplay consists of using Caliburn to slice up baddies, with, you guessed it, waggle. Seriously, all you do is waggle to win. There's no rhyme or reason for any of it. You just flail your arms like you're having some sort of epileptic seizure and you kill everything on the screen. I suppose the idea is that, depending on the way you swing the remote, that's how you slice, but that very rarely works, and it's hardly even necessary. Just swing haphazardly and you will kill whatever is in your way. Now, in the game's defense, motion controls have never been perfect, and this game was released before the Wii Motion Plus, but I still can't defend it too much just by how uninspired the idea is. Seriously, every other Wii game at the time was using the motion controls for the same thing. Swinging a sword or your fists or a chainsaw or a beam sword or whatever. It's so boring. Sonic and the Secret Rings might have had bad controls that barely worked, but at least the game tried to do something different with the technology. Plus, it's really annoying having to stop and fight enemies once you get a good burst of speed going. This game is much slower than other Sonic games, and I understand why, but that doesn't make it any less of a bad idea. Because of the slow nature, the linear stage design, and constantly having to stop to fight enemies, it ends up being a very boring game. Every stage is the same, and every few seconds you're doing the same thing. If it wasn't for my wrists getting a workout, I probably would have fallen asleep halfway through every stage. I'm not a fan of the gameplay in this game. After you get about halfway through the game, you're given the option of playing as the other knights, Shadow, Blaze, and Knuckles. Shadow plays similar to Sonic, Blaze I can't seem to ever get to do anything I want her to, and Knuckles is the best one. His weapons are cooler, he can glide, and climb up walls. Clearly this game should have just been about him. He even gives an accurate demonstration of how to control the game when he attacks. Being able to play as the other characters is a nice feature, but it doesn't help the game be any better in the long run. I already mentioned the stages being incredibly linear. They might be large in design, but more than half of what you see on screen at any one time is blocked off. You just have to follow that set path, and it really sucks, because some of the stages could be really cool. There's a really nice atmosphere to a lot of them, and I'm honestly disappointed by how poorly they were executed. There's an enchanted forest where the trees attack you, some really cool looking cave stages, and a volcano minecart place where you can grind on mine tracks. It's really cool, but like I said, none of them are done well because of the linear nature of the game itself. Had these stages been in any other Sonic game, they'd probably be instant classics, but instead, they're just missed opportunities. At the end of each stage, you identify a bunch of random objects you find throughout the stage. These are used as equipment to craft better weapons. I never really found much of a use for that, but, you know, it's neat that it's there. I never had to craft one to beat the main game, but if you want to, go ahead. It's a nice feature, I guess. The bosses are lame. The battles against the knights last all of 20 seconds, and as long as you know how to block their attacks, you'll take very little damage. There's a boss battle with a dragon that flings you into other enemies, which is just annoying, and there's a battle with King Arthur where his horse can outrun Sonic the freaking Hedgehog. Honestly, this is the hardest part of the game, and that's just because there's a lot of trial and error. You have to time your waggle with his attacks, and they change speeds after each hit. You just have to memorize how fast each attack is going to be in order to deal damage. The final boss is, what else, a supersonic and space battle, but with waggle. Yawn! Graphically, this is a very nice looking game. The stages are bright and colorful, or dark and grim if they need to be, and like I said, the atmosphere is heavy. The menu design is really neat too. It really ties in with the medieval theme they've got going here. I'm not a big fan of the story, but cutscenes though. Yeah, they look nice at first, but they don't animate too well, and they just seem to drag on and on. Characters just crossfade to show they've moved or are moving, and sometimes they just slide across the screen like Poochie returning to his home planet. All it needs is a slide whistle. It's not a bad idea, just not a well executed one. In terms of glitches and technical stuff, the camera kind of sucks. It's always positioned behind you, and it can get a little obnoxious if you have to go backwards in order to kill an enemy or save a villager or something. When it comes to the music, I quite like this game's soundtrack. Each track is fitting for both the location and the time period, and there's a lot of nice melodies in the game, even if it does feature some of Crush 40's worst work to date. They also strangely sample tracks from old games as each of the different characters' themes. As much as I like old Sonic music, Unknown from Me and Throw It All Away clash a little too much with the rest of the game's music. And yes, the 4Kids voice actors are still around, and they're still bad. Next! Overall, Sonic and the Black Knight is, well, it's bad, but it's not awful. I've definitely played worse, much worse, actually. With its linear level design, uninspired and downright bad use of the motion control, poor camera and all-around goofy premise, it ends up just being a poor, boring game. Though the graphics are nice, the music is good, and the atmosphere on some of the stages is heavy, I still can't bring myself to recommend this game to anyone. You could do much worse, but you could also do much better. So that was my review of Sonic and the Cure for Insomnia. I mean Sonic and the Black Knight. Sorry it took so long, and... wait a minute. Do you know what this means? After months and months of doing this, I'm finally done with the bad Sonic games! Yay!